I think Kickstarter is one of the best and at the same time worst things to ever happen to video games. On one hand, you get to actively watch, take part of, and herald what might be the next big thing. For your one-time payment of generally a half or a quarter off of a full-price game, you can get in on the ground floor of said game, sitting on one's investment to be pleasantly surprised when the final product eventually does come out. And other times, you feel like...
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Yeah. Luckily, Bloodstained very happily sits on the former end of the spectrum. Let's talk about it, shall we? Kickstarter video games are in this constant weird flux to an almost Schrodinger's cat level of suspense that constantly puts you on edge. You had to put money down on what's basically an investment, then have to sit and wait and hope your investment doesn't go under, steal your money and run, mismanage the money and need more, or any of the other multitude of various problems, and even then, you still have to hope that the game doesn't come out and you're left with a buggy and or subpar product that wasn't even worth half of what you put into it. Yeah, I'm going to continue to use this as an example throughout my videos. Get used to it. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of successful Kickstarter games, but the bad ones tend to shine a far harsher light on the prospect. So after the colossal failure of Mighty No. 9, Bloodstained had massive shoes to fill with a near identical take on its build-up and its hype. But if you want a more in-depth video on the making of these two games, I suggest watching Stop Skeletons from Fighting's videos on the subject. For a lot of people, Castlevania Symphony of the Night safely sits atop PlayStation as not only one of the best games on the system, but of all time. And each game that followed took bits and pieces, reinventing and altering the system ever so slightly, but remaining to its core. Platforming, silky smooth combat that is adjustable depending on your weapon, ability, and playstyle, and map design that would make MC Escher blush. I made it funny. Bloodstained itself fits so perfectly into the mold of Metroidvania that it feels like the genre never truly left. It's an evolution of the genre, taking all the little bits and pieces that Igarashi has built up over nearly 20 years of experience to bring us this masterpiece in and of itself. Much like Mega Man's core games, it isn't stray from the formula, but embraces it and runs with it for better or worse at times. What I mean by worse, I'll come back to later in the video. Let's get to the actual review. The combat? Absolutely marvelous. It's everything you want from a Metroidvania game, plus some. Every enemy has its own unique pattern of attacks and movements, all designed to trip you up while blending in with the environment to throw you off. The first time you fight a lot of these enemies, you're going to be punished and hit. And hell, even later on, you're going to be punished and hit. But with your experience, you will be able to flow and move effortlessly around the map, weaving between attacks and eventually overcoming these same enemies without skipping a beat, while also styling all over them. And when you get into that rhythm, finding the weapon type that clicks for you while jamming out to the gothic rock beats, orgasmic. Speaking of which, let's talk about the weaponry. While I do love Symphony of the Night, I feel like one of its biggest problems was weapon variety. Not in a sense of options per se, but the fact that there were so few differences between each of the weapons. You have a few unique options here and there, like the Chrysangam and the Hobian dagger, but for the most part, every weapon in the game stands as a straightforward attacking weapon, with some having special properties here and there. As the Metroidvania series has continued, however, and what I believe culminates it to its apex in Portrait of Ruin, weapons began to each have their own unique identity and feeling to them, and Bloodstained hits the ground running with that. You have the Great Swords, which similarly to the hulking chunks of metal in the Monster Hunter series, are slower than other weapons, but trade that off for the massive devastating single hits, some of which even can be charged up similar to those weapons, but all of them having overhead downward swings. You have spears with their tinier hitboxes, but extended range to be able to hit enemies outside of their own range and in your own safety. The standard fair sword serves as your everyman weapon, boasting no outright advantage in any area, but making up for it by being bad at nothing. And oh, if you aren't short hopping into attacking with this weapon, have you been playing this game properly? The whips, which of course they had to add, having a short delay at its startup to swing at a downward angle, but having more range than most other weapons. Though if you use it properly and like God intended, you can probably figure out a way to remove said delay. The weave stick, katana, which works like a mix between the whip and the swords, that have a medium range quick swing attack, but instead of going at a downwards angle like the whip, you get an upwards angle that hits above you. The knives, which give you a low range and power, but are offset by the abilities most of them have, like poison and offense down, and offer some of the highest attack speed in the game. And finally, my two favorite weapons in the game, the kicks and the gun, which is funny because they work on completely different opposite ends of the spectrum from one another. The gun is broken. In a game where most enemies are balanced around close-range encounters, it turns out having a weapon that can pick them off from off-screen tends to be really stupid. And if you start using the bullets that multiply the weapon's damage and or are the weakness of the enemy, the term cheese doesn't even begin to describe the stupidity you get into. Its one downside is that bullets get really expensive really fast, so unless you plan to buy only bullets or you plan to grind and craft them, don't get into the habit of buying other items from the shopkeep. That said, you are given free bullets that are infinite but do far less damage than every other weapon in the game. And finally, my favorite, the shoes. I'm a martial artist in real life. Kicking things is awesome. And if you ever tell me in a game I can kill monsters by straight up kicking them or punching them, of course I'm taking that option. And the best part, both your dive kick and slide do damage based on your shoes. So if you know what you're doing, the shoes outright have the fastest attack speed in the game. That isn't all either. Each weapon type alongside that has techniques that allow you to modify your attacks with said weapon. After reading books scattered around the game and finding them, you'll be given a technique and a list of weapons that you can use it on. And after mastering it, you'll be allowed to use them on all weapons of that type. I'm telling you, the level of options in this game is insane. Beyond just weapons, your magical ability, called shards, takes a page straight out of Arya and Dawn of Sorrow, adding an additional layer of gameplay well beyond your weapons. These are acquired by killing your enemies and randomly acquiring them. There are 5 different types of color-coded shards, starting with your reds, which are your general attacks, doing everything from throwing a spear to summoning Cthulhu-like tentacles to double slap everything on the screen. Your directionals, or your purples, which can be aimed with your right stick, with her hand controlling where the attack goes before racking it out with whatever shard you have in mind. Personal favorite? Auto-tracking, hard-hitting, instant casting lightning. Your activatables, or your blue manipulatives, which activate various kinds of buffs and abilities, with my personal favorite, and assume speedrunner's favorite as well, the accelerator, which works near identical to the Metroid Shine Spark. Your passive yellows, which do just that. They are passives. And a little tip between you and me, upgrade them to level 9 through crafting, and they become permanent without them needing to be equipped. Your greens, or familiars, which similarly to how they function in Symphony of the Night, are stand-like beings that float around near your back. Some attack, some block, some buff, and others heal. There isn't any real downside to not having one up at all times, so you should. I'm personally a fan of the Silver Knight, which blocks and attacks, as well as the book, which randomly buffs you. And your whites, which work twofold as your upgraded yellows and your movement options, like your obvious double jump, and another ability that I won't spoil here. And all this is piled on with a questing system, a crafting system, and a food and prep buff system. There's just so many options and ways to play it, and even going beyond just gameplay, but cosmetically as well. Rather early on in the game, you get the ability to customize Miriam's appearance herself to whatever suits your fancy. That's right, you can style the waifu. This game has it all. Now with how much I've been gushing about this game, you must think I have no problems with it, right? Well, don't get me wrong, I put nearly 30 hours into it already, and don't plan to stop until I get all the achievements and beat the game on its hardest difficulty of Nightmare. But with it being so good, the little bits of bad here and there are all the more noticeable. First, I'm not sure if it's everyone, but during my initial playthrough, I suffered 2 crashed desktops. And you might not have any, and it's probably fine now, with the patches that have since come out, and they didn't happen at horrible times, only losing a few rooms worth of time. That said, I've heard the Switch version of this game is absolutely dreadful. Second, more so than any other Metroidvania, I feel like getting the true ending and even into certain areas of the map is very poorly conveyed. I'm not talking about finding a hidden wall conveyed, I'm talking about locating a chest that has no indicator of any kind, as well as getting around the map, requiring a shard that drops from a random enemy. Sure, the game does push you to hunt for it by giving you a quest to kill said monster, and thus very likely having the shard drop, but if you aren't lucky and it doesn't drop, well, you're stuck until then. Not a fan. Third, and to a lot of people, this wouldn't be a problem, and to myself, I'm not even sure if it's a problem. But this game goes beyond homage in some degrees and feels like simulacrum. Without going hard into spoiler territory, it follows tit for tat some of the exact same plot points and even items needed to advance to the true ending as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Again, if that is what you want, and that's what it was advertised as, that's fine. But while it is good to look to the past and build upon it, following it so faithfully might hurt the advancement of the series as a whole. But again, this is just me and my personal thoughts. Beyond that, those are my only real nitpicks and qualms with this entire game. The game reminds me a lot of My Hero Academia, and it doesn't do anything new. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, it doesn't take anything from its past games it's based on and change it. Instead, it takes all the best parts of the series that came before it and refines them into this beautiful masterpiece that stands before us as a testament that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, just build upon it. Which is funny, especially since I spent a good minute beforehand talking about how copying the previous game Symphony of the Night so much might be a bad thing. Either way, let's round this video off with a score. A couple of months ago, I would have done something similar to ProJared, but you know. So maybe it's best I distance myself from that. So my final score for this game sits at a comfortable 8.5 out of 10. There are a few problems here and there, but overall, this is a game built from the ground up to be exactly what it promised to be. A return to the Metroidvanias of old, and it does it swimmingly, while adding just enough new innovations on the formula to be really good. If at times too unwilling to change for better or worse, and poor and or lazy map design near the end makes me wonder if they were a bit rushed just to release this game after nearly 4 years of development. If you are a fan of indie titles, Metroidvanias, or simply want to stick to the overbearing AAA video game market that says games like this aren't what people want anymore, this game is for you. And you're doing yourself a disservice, especially for the amazing price tag of only $40. I suggest getting it on PC, PS4, or Xbox though, until they fix the Switch version. You know. So, a bit of an aside to end this video, right? I want to apologize for this taking so long to come out. I finished my LP like a week ago, and this game's now, almost 2 or 3 weeks old. So this review's a little bit late, but a slew of good games came out, or just stuff came out, and I really wanted to play it. So we had Legion coming out and Path of Exile. You had Final Fantasy XIV with its new expansion. Magic Gathering Arena also got its new core set. So a lot of things came out and kind of distracted me, and I apologize for that. But here's the review. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll be starting my next LP, or whatever it is, probably, if not tomorrow, the day after that. And I hope everyone just has a good morning, evening, day, night, and just good life in general. Either way, I am out. So long. Later.